The road to the Kentucky Derby rolls through the Big Easy. Let's take a first look at the Louisiana Derby. Welcome, everyone. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and this is a first look preview of Saturday's Louisiana Derby here on NYRA Bets. Now, before we get into looking at this field of 10 running for 100 potential points, earning towards the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby, want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel. We have race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. And oh, by the way, make sure to head over and sign up on NYRA Bets and play with us. We have a lot of great promotions as well. So press that like and subscribe button today. All right. Well, like I said, we have a field of 10 in this Louisiana Derby on Saturday's card, which I'll be honest is absolutely stacked. It's a 12-race card, the Fairground Oaks. I know Kaylee Shapiro, my colleague who covers the Oaks Trail, she's really excited about that race. You have Good Cheer coming back in that one. Then you have the New Orleans Classic. You got Sierra Leone making his 2025 debut. That should be a lot of fun. So can't wait to see all of these races. But obviously, the marquee is going to be that Louisiana Derby. 100-point prep race. If you win, you're automatically into the Kentucky Derby. If you finish second, you're pretty much so automatically into the Kentucky Derby as well. So interesting dynamics here to see how these horses are, what their goals are going into this in terms of how many points they need to accumulate to potentially get into the starting gate. We've seen a couple of horses scratch out of previous races to point here. So that's an interesting dynamic as well. But let's dive into this field of 10 and talk about some interesting dynamics that we have in this race and some interesting runners as well. So in the Louisiana Derby, a couple of things will pop off this page at you right now. First is that the distance, it's 1 mile and 3/16. Outside of the UAE Derby, which is also 1 mile and 3/16, this is the longest Kentucky Derby prep race. This is the closest these horses will get to running the 1.25 miles that they will run the first Saturday in May at Churchill Downs. So it's a great barometer for which of these horses can handle distance. And this is going to be, like I said, a very critical component. In recent years, we've seen horses win this race tracking the pace. We've also seen horses win this race coming from well off the pace. So there's not necessarily one running style that always does well in this particular race due to the distance. So you can see horses really sit close. You can see horses closing from the back. A lot of it depends on the pace dynamics, which we will get into. The other thing you'll notice is we have a very tepid morning line favorite in the form of number 1, John Hancock for Brad Cox, 7-2 in the morning line. You see a lot of horses kind of floating right around there. You see Built at 4-1, Caldera at 5-1, Instant Replay at 6-1. A lot of horses at 8-1, then 10-1, 12-1. So it's a very evenly matched field, I would say, and a really good potential betting race, in my opinion. So let's dive into this. We'll kind of go through 1 through 10, kind of talk about the field, talk about some of the dynamics that are going to be at play on Saturday at Fairgrounds. And what's particularly interesting is looking at starting on the inside rail, looking at John Hancock, who is your morning line favorite at 7-2 for trainer Brad Cox, coming off of a win in that Sam F. Davis. And this is a horse who has only run 2 career starts, broke its maiden at Tampa, and did so earning an 81 buyer speed figure with Lasix, then switches off Lasix, runs an 84 buyer speed figure, going 2 turns in the Sam F. Davis and beats Owen Almighty and Poster. Now, Poster's a pretty nice horse, and Owen Almighty comes back to win the Tampa Bay Derby in gate-to-wire fashion. So John Hancock's form was flattered a little bit. That said, if you're a buyer speed figure person, John Hancock's buyer of last out of an 84 really is not a standout in any way, shape, or form in this field. In fact, just about almost every horse has run faster than that that's entered in this race. In fact, I think every horse has at least one race faster than that who has entered in this race. So, yes, he's won a prep race that has proven to come back pretty solid in terms of Owen Almighty coming back to run well, but it is questionable in terms of how good this horse really is. I think the other question that is fair to ask is Brad Cox's Colts have not really fired this Kentucky Derby season. Tappan Street was kind of a disappointing second to Burnham Square in the Holy Bull, and we saw Burnham Square come back and run kind of a nothing race in the Fountain of Youth. So that really, I think, questions how good Tappan Street is. Then you have a horse like Patch Adams, who's just consistently underperformed. You have a horse like Rapture, who was entered in the Virginia Derby, who ran kind of a nothing race there in his second career start. So Cox has not had the sort of success that we were used to seeing him have on the Derby trail this year. John Hancock, to me, feels like a play against. Yes, he has very good early speed. He's going to send from that inside rail with Flavien Prat aboard. But now we're stretching out from 1 mile and a 16th on a speed favoring track like Tampa to 1 mile and 3/16 on a track like Fairgrounds that I think can play, depending on the day and the weather, can play a couple different ways. I just think this is a horse that is going to need to take a pretty significant step up in terms of buyer speed figures. And again, was aided by a fast track, a speed favoring track at Tampa Bay, going 2 turns the first time around. Listen, there's solid pedigree here, sired by Constitution up top. So you figure this horse, WinStar bred and owned. The connections are there. Prat and Cox are always a formidable duo, winning at a 38% clip over the last year. So there's a lot to like there about this horse, but this horse has also demonstrated only one way to win, which is to go straight to the lead. Now, I think there's a fair amount of speed in this race. I think the number 8, Furio, is another one who's going to want to send out of that inside rail. And you also have a horse like Vassimo for Todd Pletcher, who's getting blinkers on. So that's another one. Built is getting blinkers on as well. That's a horse that's fast. And we've seen Caldera for Wayne Lukas show a lot of speed. Yinzer went gate to wire last time out. So there's a fair amount of speed in this race. And I just don't think John Hancock's going to get his own way up front. And he's stretching out an extra furlong from last time out and might not have the track aiding him this time around. So I think at a tepid morning line favorite at 7-2, he's a horse that I'm going to be looking to try to get around. Let's move to the outside of him and let's look at Chunk of Gold. I think this is an interesting horse at 8-1. And it's an interesting horse because he ran second in the Risen Star. And he had a little bit of a rally, came from off the pace. With all of the speed that I just mentioned, he's going to get the same sort of setup again, I would imagine. And the other thing that's interesting about him is he is this kind of synthetic to dirt horse. He's giving me a little bit of like Two Phils vibes in some ways, in that he's this horse that can run well on both surfaces. Broke his maiden on the synthetic, ran second in the Leonidas to Baby Max at Turfway Park going a mile. Then we ran in the Risen Star. You saw a big buyer speed figure increase, ran a 92 for that effort, finished second that day, coming from off the pace. Now, remember, Magnitude won that race by almost 10 lengths. So Magnitude, who was then immediately taken off the Triple Crown Trail the day after with a bone chip in his ankle, Magnitude just absolutely freaked in that race. But sometimes in these types of races, I like to look at the horse who ran second. Yes, ran second by almost 10 lengths, but was the best of the rest. And the rest included a horse like Built, who's 4-1 on the morning line. Here's Chunk Gold at 8-1 on the morning line. Listen, the pedigree is not going to overwhelm you. This is a son of Preservationist, who, by the way, I do like quite a bit. And because a horse like Antiquarian, we also saw run well last year in the Peter Pan, who was a son of sired by Preservationist, out of a Cairo Prince mare. But, also is the full sibling to Band of Gold, who is a nice horse. Band of Gold's a nice horse. Won the Mary Washington. She was a nice filly a couple of years ago. And so Chunk of Gold, interesting horse, only sold for $2,500, has already earned $150,000 on the track. So has already been paying for that a couple times over. I like the fact that this one can sit a little off the pace, is going to be running late. Got Jareth Loveberry up again. Again, that Two Phils connection, making it even more apparent there. And this one's been working out at Turfway. I like that 59-3 bullet, 2 back on May 8th. So that shows me I think this horse is cranked up and ready to go. They had a nice little maintenance work on March 15th just to make sure everything was still going well. 5 furlongs in a minute, 1 and 2. So I think that Chunk of Gold at 8-1 is an interesting horse that's going to get the right type of setup. Now, we'll see if the track is playing the same sort of a way it was at the Risen Star Day, etc. But I just think this is a horse that at 8-1 might get overlooked a little bit, doesn't have the big name connections, doesn't have the big name pedigree and price, but I think has shown the ability to run well and beat some of these horses. So that's something that I take a lot of consideration of, and I think will like the added distance of 1 mile and 3/16. Certainly seem to relish the distance of 1 mile and an 1/8 last time out. So definitely like what I see out of Chunk of Gold, who should get some good pace to run into. Another horse that should get some pace to run into is Tiztastic. This is a number 3 horse from Steve Asmussen, and this is also 8-1 on the morning line with Joel Rosario up on the mount, sired by Tiz the Law, whose offspring have been doing well going 2 turns and getting a little bit more distance. The thing about Tiztastic is his 2 victories have come on the turf, and he's not won a single race on the dirt. He's also, it looked like he was moving the right direction in the, he ran second in the Street Sense to Sovereignty, ran third in the Kentucky Jockey Club to First Resort and Jonathan's Way, ran third in the Southwest to Speed King and Sandman, then came back and ran kind of a disappointing 5th in the Rebel to Coal Battle, Matticat Road, Sandman, etc. So, a little disappointing. You saw a regression in the buyer speed figures there from an 89 to an 81. He should get the right type of setup. He should be sitting from off the pace. You have Joel Rosario up on the mount for the first time. Joel always is good at getting horses coming from off the pace. But it is interesting that, it does seem like Asmussen has been trying to find the right jockey for this horse. This horse has had a lot of different jockeys: Tyler Gaffalione, Jose Ortiz, Christian Torres, even his son rode this horse, Irad Ortiz Jr. Everybody's kind of been up on Tiztastic. So, for a horse that's never won on the dirt, yes, he has shown some promise sometimes. He's shown the ability to pass horses. Last time out was a little bit more of a plodding effort. He's been training okay leading up to this race. He's only gotten kind of 1 work in since that Rebel Stakes towards the end of February. So interesting to see. Probably not playing Tiztastic in this particular spot. Probably, not using him too much, maybe on deeper vertical exotics, but interesting horse nevertheless. Now, the horse next to him is also trained by Steve Asmussen, and that is Yinzer. This is the last out maiden winner who broke its maiden actually on the Risen Star Day undercard and has come back to work pretty nicely since then. Interestingly enough, Asmussen gave this one a 6-furlong workout back on March 9th. You don't see Asmussen give many 6-furlong workouts. That's more of a Bob Baffert thing. You see that with Gustavo Delgado a little bit. You see a few trainers will do 6-furlong works. It's Gary Capuano. There's another, maybe John Robb. There's a Mid-Atlantic trainer who will do a lot of 6-furlong works as well. So you don't see Asmussen do it very often, but this one had a 5-furlong bullet after that maiden breaking victory as well. Now Ben Curtis hops up on the mount, takes over for one of the sons, and this is $1 million purchase, son of Twirling Candy out of a Tappet mare. The horse has gotten better the last couple of times out. The question is, can we switch off Lasix? Because the last 3 races have all come with Lasix. This horse has proven not to be nearly as good as a horse like Hypnus, 2-back, though that was over a sloppy sealed track. You look at some of those other efforts, they're not bad. 3rd place finish, a 5th place finish, but by less than a length, and then went gate to wire last time out. Does seem like this horse probably needs the lead. Is going to have to contend with a horse like John Hancock. Ben Curtis obviously rode Magnitude to victory, now takes over Yinzer. This is a horse that always had a lot of potential, obviously, when you look at that sales price. But again, is going to have to get faster and is going to have to contend with some serious horses on the front end. Notice as well, last time out, he was free and clear up on the front end. I mean, he was 3 lengths clear of the field. So he's not going to get that trip. And again, at a relatively short price and at a price of, if I'm not mistaken, 12-1, again, I'd rather find a horse that has a little bit more intrigue there. 12-1 actually feels a little short for me for a horse like this. So I'm going to be looking elsewhere for a horse like Yinzer, playing against a horse like Yinzer for West Point Thoroughbreds, CJ Stables. It's a nice horse, don't get me wrong, but I just have questions with regards to the Lasix, the trip, and the level of competition he's going to obviously have to face is going to get a lot tougher here. Well, let's look at Caldera. This is a horse for D. Wayne Lukas, who I think a lot of people had a lot of buzz for based off of that Sunland Park Derby, or the Sunland Derby, I should say, last time out. And this is a My Racehorse. So, the 5-1 morning line, you might need to kiss that goodbye. You might get something closer to 3-1 on this horse, maybe even 5-2. Who knows? The My Racehorse people always use their, their presence at the windows. That's for sure. But this one ran a really good race last time out in that Sunland Derby, coming from off the pace, dueling with Getaway Car, and just coming up short and finishing second. The coach has had this one firing off a couple of nice workouts since then, a couple of 5-furlong bullets at Oaklawn Park, 59-1 and 59-3 on March 6th, I should say, and March 14th. This was a $500,000 purchase sired by Liam's Map. I don't necessarily love the Liam's Map influence up top going longer. I also question how good this horse was based off that Sunland Park Derby. I keep calling it the Sunland Park Derby, Sunland Derby. It's the Sunland Park Oaks and the Sunland Derby. Anyway, the Sunland Derby, because he dueled with Getaway Car. What did we see from Getaway Car? Well, we just saw yesterday in the Virginia Derby, Getaway Car faded and was a complete non-factor and really regressed, one would say. So how good is Caldera based off of what we saw from Getaway Car in that last race? So I think that there's some questions there that have to still be answered. The Liam's Map influence, again, I like Liam's Map usually at a mile and less, maybe a mile and a 16th, but a mile and 3/16, a little bit of a question mark. The only victory came gate to wire. Certainly did show the ability last time out to pass horses, though I would also argue the quality of horses he passed in that Sunland Derby is a little bit of a question mark. And so can he do it against this level of competition? We'll see. He hasn't really passed horses much when you're looking at his other maiden victories, or his other maiden races, I should say. So going to be interesting to see the sort of trip that he tries to carve out, how Tyler Gaffalione, the jockey, tries to navigate this, whether he tries to get up on the lead, whether he tries to just kind of track from off the pace. I think he's going to be a shorter price than 5-1. For me, he's the horse I'm playing against. I know he's kind of the it horse in this race. He's a little bit of a wise guy horse. Everybody loves D. Wayne because we just saw him win with American Promise in the Virginia Derby. I get it, but I'm going to be playing against Caldera, I think, a little bit in this spot, just because I do have questions about how good that Sunland Derby was, and that loss to Getaway Car kind of certainly a little bit of luster comes off of that race. The buyer speed figures are absolutely moving in the right direction. The horse is training beautifully, but I question the price, I question the distance, and I question the quality of competition he's faced and whether he can really truly pass horses at this level, not just in the Sunland Derby. Another horse that's going to be an interesting one that's going to take a lot of money is Built for the Catman. Wayne Catalano, always rooting for this. Jose Ortiz up on the mount. Jose had a few different options and then landed here on Built. The blinkers are going on this horse, who did win the gun runner in gate to wire fashion, but did show the ability to pass horses 2 back in the Lecomte, finished third last time out, tired late, 2 Chunk of Gold and Magnitude, obviously, in that Risen Star. But you'll notice this horse, it's interesting, 77-92, 77-92. I don't think it's a pattern by any stretch. I don't think he's going to be running a 77 again. I actually think that Lecomte was probably an artificially low number, in my opinion. We've seen that race come back stronger next time out. The Risen Star felt like a really strong race, obviously, with Magnitude running that huge race that day. Built tired a little bit, was up close to a pretty strong pace, though. They went 110-4 to the opening 6 furlong, so they were moving pretty well, 46-4 to the half mile. So they were trucking, and that horse was sitting just off of that pace. And then, just like I said, tired a little bit late, maybe understandable. Has been working out nicely for Catalano leading up to this race at the fairgrounds. The blinkers are coming on. I would expect this horse to be very forward as a result of this. I think what Catalano wants is this horse to be up on the lead or very close to it, very similar to that maiden breaking victory at Keeneland when he sat second and then kind of went by rendered judgment later in the stretch. So I think that's kind of the trip that he wants. But now that you're going to be contending with a lot more speed with John Hancock, with some of these other horses that we'll get to in a second, like a Furio, like a Vassimo potentially, even Caldera, we talked about, Yinzer, we talked about already. So listen, I like Built a lot at 4-1. He's a relatively short price. I think there's reasons to like him, but there's also reasons to play against him in this spot. The equipment change is going to be interesting. Does it help with the endurance? Does it help maybe keep him focused late in the race a little bit, not just inject more speed into him? So will be interesting to see. But this is one who certainly does have experience running over the fairgrounds main track. Had that very, very impressive victory in the gun runner, gate to wire, over Magnitude, over rendered judgment. That was a nice field, but came back to just barely miss out on the Lecomte. I thought he ran a really good race that day, actually. And then, like I said, was a little bit of a distant third last time out, but Magnitude freaks so much, it's hard to really hold that against him too much in that race, though Chunk of Gold did get by him late. So interesting to see kind of how Built bounces back. I think he certainly can. He's very capable of winning this race, but I do think there's some questions about just what's the pace dynamic going to look like and what's the trip Jose Ortiz is going to be able to work out. Now, a horse that's also getting blinkers on is Vassimo for trainer Todd Pletcher. This is one sired by Nyquist out of a Pulpit mare. Rather modest sale, only $120,000. This one only has a maiden breaking victory, but was disqualified from purse money because this horse tested positive for a substance that was not allowed on race day, or having too much of a substance that was not allowed on race day. So the horse was disqualified from that victory. Rapture, actually, who we saw come back to not run particularly well in the Virginia Derby, is the horse that Vassimo beat that day. Rapture, of course, came back to win next time out as well, but so did Vassimo. Vassimo got Lasix, won going 2 turns and a $75,000 optional claimer at Tampa, tracking the pace, then goes to the Risen Star, finishes 4th, again behind Chunk of Golden Built, but ahead of a lot of other horses. It was a field of 12 that day. Sat more of a mid-pack trip, actually faded back quite a way late, and then was passing some tired horses late, kind of re-engaged, came again. That re-engagement is something I've seen from Pletcher horses repeatedly. Mo Donegal I saw it with. You saw it with Tapit Trice. You see it with some of these horses that he trains where it's like they lose focus, and they kind of fade back a little bit. They just start running in place, and then they have to get re-engaged. Once they get re-engaged, they start running like heck, but it's a little too late. So it's interesting that Pletcher now goes to the blinkers, which hopefully, like I said, not probably just for speed, but more so also just to focus this horse, because it's felt like this horse lost some focus in that race, in that Risen Star. Irad Ortiz Jr. stays up on the mount. I think Vassimo at 8-1, at 12-1. It's a little bit of an interesting play here. This horse has done nothing but get faster. 73, 81, 89 buyer speed figures. So this horse is moving in the right direction. I don't know what this horse's upward trajectory might be, but certainly a horse that with the equipment change, you'd figure is going to be forward, maybe is going to like this, this added distance, seemed to not mind it last time out. Even though he lost by 12.25 lengths, he really put himself behind the 8 ball with losing concentration, I think, around the backstretch and around the turn. So re-engaged, and really was passing some horses late to show he should be able to appreciate this mile and 3/16. But again, we'll just have to wait and see. But I think there's something to like here at 12-1 for a horse like Vassimo. At the very least, I'm going to be using this one underneath. I think this is a horse to definitely consider underneath in some ways. Now, then you have a horse like Furio for Joe Sharp. This one is coming off of a second place finish to instant replay last time out, who we'll talk about in a second. This is a horse to speedball. This horse won gate to wire, going 6 furlongs, stepped up and went a mile and a 16th last time out. Certainly improved the buyer speed figures, went from an 75 to an 84. But like I said, faded late after setting a pretty aggressive early pace, going 46-4, or 46-3, I should say, to the half, 111-1 to the 6 furlong mark. He's going to be facing probably stronger or similar fractions to that one going longer. I will say my colleague Kaylee Shapiro did a real interesting deep dive into the mare, Take Charge Angel, and looking at that horse, who has, it's interesting. This one was a $400,000 sale of McKenzie. They bred her back to McKenzie. The horse that is, I think, a yearling now has already sold for $900,000, and Take Charge Angel is now in full to tap it. So clearly they like what this mare is producing. That this mare produced a McKenzie in the form of Furio that was a $400,000 sale. She's already produced another McKenzie that's a $900,000 sale, and now is in full to tap it. That is interesting. Clearly Gainesway, who's breeding this one, really likes this. Really likes what this mare is producing. So it speaks to the talent that Furio may have. Joe Sharp is a 23% trainer. Luis Saez taking over for Jose Ortiz is up on the mount. Again, I worry about the pace dynamics with Furio and whether or not he can sustain this bid going a mile and 3/16 when there's a lot of other pressure. It should be noted last time out, only a 6-horse field. So definitely some questions there. Has lost to a horse like Big Boat and Kalahari Dream, who are decent horses, and then broke its maiden over a field that really has not necessarily made itself stand out. And like I said, last time out, lost to instant replay, finished second. But this one's going to be part of that early pace dynamic. Will be interesting to see how the track plays, whether it's speed favoring. Maybe it helps keep this one up. Has been working out nicely at the fairgrounds, 59-4, 5 furlong work on March 9th. In the 9th position, we have instant replay for Brad Cox. This one's stepping up into the Derby trail. I think there's maybe a reason to be a little skeptical about this one's last number, just because it came with Lasix. This horse had been running 56, 58, 76, 75, goes on Lasix, runs a 92. Now, granted, it also corresponds with stretching out to a mile and a 16th for the first time. Florent Giroux stays up on the mount. This is a horse that is bred and owned by Gary and Mary West. Everybody knows that's a strong ownership group for and an ownership team for Brad Cox. And this one's sired by Maximum Security out of Medaglia d'Oro mare. But this one was running in maiden claiming races. I mean, now granted, $100,000 maiden claiming races, but maiden claiming races nevertheless. Then stepped up, ran fourth to Sandman in that race at Oaklawn Park, where he also finished behind Calling Card, who we're going to see run in the Jeff Ruby Stakes on Saturday. And then last time out, like I said, sat off the pace, made a really nice move, and just absolutely blew away the field and beat Furio in that $100,000 optional claimer. That was coming off a little bit of a freshening, hadn't run in about 2 months from mid-December to mid-February. So, this horse maybe benefited from a little bit of time off, certainly has a nice work, a 47-3, 4 furlong work on March 8th, came back with a minute and 1, 5 furlong work on March 15th. So, Cox has this one pointing in the right direction. The question is now we're switching back off of Lasix. Are these numbers, the buyer speed figures, going to regress back to what they look like before that 92 and before switching on Lasix? So I do think there's some questions there for Cox to answer. And again, one of the things we said, Brad Cox's Colts have not really been that overwhelming this year. And so I think instant replay, yes, coming off an impressive victory at the fairgrounds, but I think there's some reasons to play against this horse. Now, then you look at a horse like Hypnus, interesting horse. Looks so good in debut for Kenny McPeak, but that came with Lasix over a sloppy sealed track. So those are two things to take into consideration. Track condition, Lasix. Switched off of Lasix in the Rebel and ran 7th. Now, admittedly, had a tough trip that day. That was not a great trip. Brian Hernandez Jr. stays up on the mount. That Rebel, we've not necessarily seen come back. It's going to be interesting to see how that race comes back overall. Certainly won by Cole Battle. Matticat rode 2nd, Sandman 3rd that day. But, Hypnus has the opportunity to move forward, but I will say Kenny McPeak switching off Lasix has always been a play against angle for me. His numbers are just atrocious, no matter how you slice them, particularly when looking at his boys and the Colts. Now it's second time without Lasix. He draws the far outside post, though, as Joe Christofix pointed out on the draw live stream the other day. Fairgrounds has a plenty long home stretch going into that first turn, so the outside post should not be that much of a big deal. This horse does not have very good early speed, though, so it's likely going to let a lot of speed go out in front of him and is going to tuck over behind it. Might get the right sort of setup and trip potentially if he can replicate what he did in that maiden special weight race, going a mile and a 16th at Fairgrounds. And so, there's a possibility maybe this horse can recapture that. I'm a little skeptical on Hypnus. I just think that this horse is maybe not quite up to the same caliber, regressed a little bit off of Lasix. Yes, the trip wasn't great, and I think getting a better trip will lead to a better finish. Maybe in deeper vertical exotics I could include this horse, but I have a hard time seeing this one being my up top choice. So all of that being said, where am I going in this race? Well, it's a really wide open race, and I don't necessarily I'm not in love with any horse in this race. I do think a horse like Chunk of Gold is really interesting. I think that horse at 8-1 is interesting. I think Vassimo at 12-1 could be a little bit interesting. I think Built out of the favorites is probably the most likely one to win. But John Hancock, I'm going to be playing against a little bit. I think Caldera, there's some question marks there based upon what we saw from Getaway Car and just what we think out of that Sunland Derby in general. So, going to be an interesting race, though. It's going to be a wide open affair. We got you covered here on NYRA Bets. We're going to have race previews for this race. I'm going to be doing the whole card. Kaylee Shapiro and I are going to be talking about the Fairground Oaks as well. So plenty of content here to get you ready for a big Saturday at Fairgrounds. All right, friends. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.